On today's episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, Anthony recounts his latest retro game purchases at his local stores, Pastime Legends video games and Vortex video games, along with a special interview and discussion with Dr. Gameology, Daniel Kaufman. Hello everyone and welcome to the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode 406. Anthony here, and as you can tell right now, I am solo. I do have a co-host a little bit right now, and that is Link, my cat, who loves to show up. He doesn't look very happy right now, though. So, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode, not just because I'm solo, but we have a very special interview that's going to be happening on this episode. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction, a little bit about some shopping I did, and then we're going to go straight into that interview. So before we get to that, I wanted to talk about just a few things. Last weekend, went shopping, picked up a few games, and just wanted to show them off really quickly. And a lot of these were games that I purchased for personal reasons. So there's definitely a connection to me with each one of these games. The first one I'm going to start with is Scooby-Doo Mystery for the Super Nintendo. I picked up a copy of that because I remember buying this game when it first came out. Now, granted, when this game came out, I think I was in high school, so I wasn't exactly watching Scooby-Doo anymore, or I would watch it like early in the morning or something like that. But I picked this up because I thought it would just be a fun little adventure to play. Completely different from the Sega Genesis version. The Sega Genesis version kind of played more like a Maniac Mansion Day of the Tentacle kind of game, where it was more of a point-and-click adventure, whereas this one you actually took control of the characters to go solve the mystery. It's not the longest game. You can get through it probably within, I want to say, like an hour or so, if I remember it correctly. But I just remember having a lot of fun with it, and Scooby-Doo, always been a fan. So I saw this in the store and wanted to add it to my collection. So that's one game right there that I grabbed. Second one that I grabbed is actually on the Atari 2600. And this is one that I don't remember having on the Atari. I remember having it on the Commodore 64. In fact, I think I still have it on my Commodore 64. And I'm talking about Crystal Castles. I love the artwork on the cartridge. Looks pristine, which was really nice to see. So I saw this and thought I would pick up a copy because I do not have it in my Atari collection, and I really enjoyed this game. Like the arcade version of this game I used to enjoy a lot. I loved playing it on the Commodore 64. It has a bit of an isometric view, so the controls on it are a little rough to get under control, but otherwise it's a really fun game. If you've never played Crystal Castles, there are opportunities online where I'm sure you can try it out. Next game that I grabbed in my collection was actually one that I had, and in my many moves, if you've been following this show for, a few years, you'll know that I tend to move a lot. Just life happens and off I go. But one of the games that got lost along the way was WCW NWO World Tour for the Nintendo 64. Now, the N64 wrestling games are probably some of the games that I played the most in the 90s because my friends and I were huge wrestling fans, and we played every single one of them that came out. And these are the games that THQ put out. They started with WCW, and then they moved over to WWF, WWE now, but WWF at the time, and put out WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy. And as you know, or if you don't know, No Mercy is still considered by some to be the best wrestling game that has ever come out, even to today. And I can definitely argue for that as well, because I don't think there's any other game that I go back to and play more than these THQ wrestling games in terms of the wrestling genre. They were by far like the easiest controls to learn. The library of wrestlers was large, and also this was at the height of the wrestling industry when WCW and WWF were fighting for supremacy. So all the top stars were captured in either one game or the other. So I just wanted to add WCW vs NWO World Tour back into my collection because it was actually the first one THQ did on the N64. So added that to the collection. Before I get to the last two games, I'm gonna switch over to there was a a book that I found, a guide. And for those of you who know, I talk about Myst a lot on the show. In fact, on our last episode when we were talking about story puzzler games, episode 405, I brought up the Myst series, and there was a strategy guide for one of the Myst games, and it wasn't all that expensive, so I thought I would grab it. And this is Uru Ages Beyond Myst. I don't remember if this was like the fourth or fifth game in the series. I think it was the fourth one, because Myst 3 was called Myst 3 Exile, and I don't know if there was a Myst 4. I don't know exactly all of them, but I saw the strategy guide, and I thought it would be a nice one to add to my collection. So grab that as well. And then the last two things that I picked up recently, this was one I've been looking for actually for a long time, and I was looking for it on the Xbox 360. But on the 360, for some reason, I remember when I would go to the store to look for this, it was either unavailable or was always really expensive. Fast forward to today, I own now a PlayStation 3, and I've had a PlayStation 3 for a little while now, but I didn't own a PlayStation 3 when it first came out. I went the Xbox 360 route, and I never wound up buying a PS3 because the games that I played were available on both systems. But this one I grabbed for one specific reason. It's Hasbro Family Game Night 3 for the PlayStation 3, and the main reason why I bought it is right here, Clue. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am a huge fan of the board game Clue. It is my favorite board game of all time, and I love the video game versions of it. In fact, back in January, I did a live stream of Clue on the Super Nintendo. So this version of Clue is actually, I think, the only video game version that I don't own, nor have I played. So I was really happy to see that not only was this available at the store that I went to, but it was affordable. So I picked this up, and I haven't played it yet, but I'm really looking forward to popping this in my PS3 and giving Clue a try. Also curious enough to try Mousetrap, because Mousetrap was also a fun board game when you were a kid, so I'm just curious to see how that plays out on the PS3. The last thing that I picked up, and a friend of mine was actually not a friend of mine, my cousin was asking me to look for a copy of the Wolverine game, X-Men Origins Wolverine, on the PlayStation 3. Now, for some reason, the game has been lauded as like being better than the movie, and then on top of that, it's not a super rare game, but it's a little bit rare, so it actually goes for a decent amount of money. And a copy that he bought on eBay didn't work out for him, so I went into the game store looking for a copy of X-Men Origins Wolverine on the PS3. I found a 360 version of it, but I did not find a PS3 version of it. Now, this just kind of got me in a Marvel mood. I did not pick up that game on the 360, but what I wound up grabbing was Wolverine Adamantium Rage on the Sega Genesis. So I saw this sitting there, and I remember renting this game. I don't think I ever owned it, and I was a huge Marvel fan, huge X-Men fan. So I thought I would grab this and add it to my collection. And again, the box is in excellent condition. And on top of that, the cartridge looks just as good. So just open it up. It does not have the instruction booklet, which was a little bit of a bummer, but I was just happy to get this and add it to my collection. So Wolverine Adamantium Rage is now in my collection as my collection continues to grow. And that's everything that I picked up. A shout out to Pastime Legends video games over in Troy, New York, and also Vortex video games in Waterville, New York. Those were the two stores that I hit up. They're always really good for whatever you need, and they definitely have a lot of games that you can choose from. So it was a really good overall shopping experience. Okay, but now let's get to the meat of this episode. And my guest this week is actually, actually, if you remember episode 401, I had Dr. Anthony Bean, who was a geek therapist on the show. He actually referred me over to this person. His name is Daniel Kaufman. He's also known as Dr. Gameology. Again, he has a PhD in counselor education and supervision. He focuses on helping people with behavioral addiction, and on top of that, he has a podcast called The Gaming Persona. He's written psychology books focusing on Pokemon, Elden Ring, The Last of Us, The Witcher, and he is known online as Dr. Gameology. So I thought this would be the perfect kind of person to interview for the Retro Gamers podcast. And and speaking of, he also hosts a podcast called The Gaming Persona. So I just thought that that would be a good fit for the show. So without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Gameology, Daniel Kaufman. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. And I have a very special guest here. This is Dr. Daniel Kaufman. Daniel is also known as Dr. Gameology.
Yeah.
And and he's another, you're the second doctor that I'm having on the show. So I feel like there's some cred actually happening here finally. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to do this.
I'm really excited to have you because I think we're going to have a really nice conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. So just to get started, just introduce yourself to my listeners, my watchers, and tell them who you are.
All right, I'm Daniel or Dr. Kaufman, and I am a associate professor. I teach grad school for mental health counseling students, and I also am the director of a nationwide telehealth program that focuses on helping people with process addiction issues or things that are sometimes technology based and are related to our mental health. But the approach that we use is always client centered and focused on being positive about it. So it's not a video games are bad kind of thing. It is more of a what are video games for you, and can we use this as part of the strategy to make those improvements happen? And I train clinicians across the country. I do conferences, I do panels at fan conventions all the time. And so my mission has become to use my training in clinical mental health counseling, but also my lifetime of being a gamer to correct a lot of the mistakes typically older people have about what video games are and the idea that they're harmful, and being more of the mindset of, well, wait, all the strategies I use to gamify grad school and make it easy and never give up and always do my very best to succeed at these academic challenges, those did not come from my natural born love of school. It came from the idea that if I can beat Demon Souls on my PS3 five times around, I can't fail this class. That would just make me look like an idiot.
That the way you put it is so interesting because my first question that I was going to throw at you is how you connected going into mental health with video game and like how you decided that that was going to be the focus of it. But I just feel like how you tackle your classes kind of just leads right into that.
Well, yeah. So one of the books that I read a long time ago was by Jane McGonigal. It's called Reality is Broken, something, something, How Video Games Can Save the World, right? And in one of the opening chapters, she wrote something that I always go back to, which is what does something have to have in order to be classified as a game? It needs to have a goal, it needs to have rules, a feedback system, and it must be voluntary. If it's not voluntary, we're not playing. Okay.
Mm,
So it needs to be voluntary. And I tell my grad students, I teach them online, and a lot of it is asynchronous, which is just a fancy word for when I do my teaching thing, I do it alone, and the students can connect with that material whenever they are alone and have the time to do school. So we're not in a Zoom call like you and me right
right.
now. And so it's asynchronous. So I tell my students all the time that you would be able to continue your adult life just fine. There might be things you want that you don't have, but you would be just fine without a master's degree. Therefore, this is voluntary for you. It's an extra goal that you have for yourself, but we're doing this in a digital platform, online, disconnected from each other. And there is a goal, get an A or a B. There
Mhm.
are rules. You messed that paper up, I just took points away. Feedback, I just took points away. Or I didn't. Good job. And It's voluntary. So I tell them grad school in this instance is also a video game.
It,
Not a
it,
fun one, not a
no.
fun one, right? It doesn't have to be fun, but it is a game, the way that I conceptualize it. But I do my best to bring the fun material into it because I do believe personally that video games give us a lot of the cognitive strategies for us to thrive in our human lives. And also, I think video games have a really cool angle into our psyche because they are allowed to give us terribly difficult challenges and just smile back at us
Mm,
if a game has an ability to smile, of course,
right.
metaphorically. But in real life, if we got that same kind of challenge given to us, that's something that we perceive is real and matters, we would get quite upset and frustrated. We might even give up and feel like that challenge was given to us from a stance of being mean. You know
Right.
that video games get away with wanting us to fail a certain amount of times and earn success.
Mhm.
Whereas when you want people to fail in real life settings, that's mean-spirited
Yeah.
oftentimes. Like, can you imagine if I taught any of my classes, Anthony, in a way that makes my students fail as much as even the easiest boss in Elden Ring?
No, I think that would be entirely I guess demoralizing is the thing I would think of at that point because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to get a bad grade in school. Now, I was, I loved school. I was one of those people that just loved school. But when I didn't get a good grade, I would always go up to the teacher. I'd be like, "Wait a minute." I go, "What happened here?" And they would
Yeah,
explain it to me, and I'm like, "Well, then I need an opportunity to do better." Um, and I always despised the teachers who would be like, "Nope, this is the grade you got. You can't change it." And I'm like, "But I want to make the attempt," which is what you do in a video game, right? If you die in a video game, if you're playing Super Mario Brothers and and Bowser kills you, you get another life and you get another opportunity to go at it, or you start
yeah.
over and you work your way back up.
Can you imagine sending an email to From Software saying, "Dear From, your bosses are ridiculous. I do not agree that I lost this fight 37 times in a 12-minute span. I
Hmm.
think that you should send me a re-saved save file where I have completed that fight, even though I did not, because your game is BS."
Mm.
You
You
know,
know what?
like that's what it's like being a professor though. Like we're essentially a GM
Hmm.
or DM if we want to use TTRPG kind of language, right? And,
Yep.
and we're constructing the challenge that results in the student earning accredited hours to go on their transcript, right? And so there is a standard they have to meet. And when instead of meeting that standard, they argue about the legitimacy of the standard,
Hmm.
there is a bit of Bowser that I have to have in me that's like, come on, just run under my feet and grab the axe. Like
Yep.
I'm not dropping this bridge for you. That's the point.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now,
And
I want your listeners to realize though that I really do want people I interact with to succeed. That's why I'm a counselor first and then a professor. And, I don't use the psychology of games to become some kind of dastardly villain in people's story. But when you interact with people in this way and you have to give them a challenge and some people might fall short, you
mhm.
do also, I didn't understand this when I was still a doc student, but I've come to be more comfortable with it now. You have to accept that you are the villain in some people's stories, no matter how
Yes.
much you wanted to see them succeed.
Yes, and I think that's just an inevitable thing because if you look back on your own education, like the way that I do, I can probably name, a handful of professors or teachers that I had that I would consider the villains of my story. So in other words, if I'm going level to level in a game, I'll point out, I'd be like, yep, I go, this was my sixth grade villain, or this was my junior in high school villain. I think we all have those experiences.
Yeah. I do really like the ability though to see people grow. And
Hmm.
one of the things that I really enjoy about teaching the way I do is I go and look at what is the textbook talking about in this particular week? What are the extra scientific publications the students are supposed to read? Probably
Hmm.
didn't, but supposed to read. And then I think, well, what video games do I think of for these concepts and principles? And then I will record an alternate lecture with some of my gameplay and some of my PowerPoint slides and merge together the idea that video games actually teach people what this is. Because what I teach is mental health, what I teach is psychology, and video games are a entertainment medium that are created to manufacture psychological and emotional experiences in the player while they problem solve. So the reason I see video games as therapeutic is because mental health counseling and psychotherapy is a largely problem solving activity with the hope of that mental and emotional growth along with the behavioral action of making changes and getting further into whatever your goal is in life.
There was something you said in there I wanna touch on because you were saying how video games can be therapy. Now, I'm wondering with some people, does that, or maybe just gamers in general, is because one of the things that I always notice when I game is that I will constantly like depending on how I'm feeling, right? When I sit down and I turn on that PlayStation or I turn on that Nintendo, I will play a specific genre. Do you have you ever correlated like the genres people play compared to them? I can already see you smiling, so I think you already know what I'm asking. But like based on the therapy that they need at the time, like is does it correlate to the types of games that they play?
Absolutely. So one of the things I was talking about on social media recently, just commenting, replying, getting into it, is that there are games that build up that therapeutic activity for people.
Mhm.
And you never see these video games being characterized negatively, even in the most mainstream media, because it's not a fun story for them if their agenda is to make video games look like they turn us all into violent delinquents. And we're just running around planting a garden and getting Infinity Nikki some fancy outfits and stuff. Like Stardew Valley's not doing that. Animal Crossing, Disney Dreamlight Valley, Infinity Nikki. Those games are not doing that to people. There's no gamer rage TikToks about those games.
Right.
It doesn't support the message that is the core agenda of those outlets. And there's so many games like that. I think I just named four off the top of my
Hmm.
head without even thinking. And that's not even close to all of
No.
them that have had, tens of thousands of players this week,
Yeah.
concurrently.
Well,
So,
and really quickly, I'll go back a little. I'll go back a little bit further, just like to touch on the retro portion of it. Like Roller
yeah,
Coaster Tycoon was mine.
exactly. The Sims, can we?
The Sims as
Yeah.
well for a while until I realized that my Sim was living a better life than me. That's when I stopped playing. I
Well,
was
that's
like,
when you gotta get competitive with your sim and why you
yeah.
and then like
Nope, that's when I was like, then I just dove into Roller Coaster Tycoon. I'm like, you know what? I like building theme parks. I'm good.
no, that is a fun activity. I really miss that. So there are other games that do create the kind of phenomena of what people see when you start thinking about what does a gaming addiction, for example, look like, and what
Hmm.
what does a video game do to people when you start losing control of your time management and losing control of your emotional regulation. You start lashing out at people around you in the same physical room, lashing
Hmm.
out at people in Discord or in the voice chat, that's like trash
Right.
talk during a sporting event. I don't really see, you can lose your cool there and say things you don't mean and you regret, but trash talk is part of competition.
Hmm.
And I think that's another thing that people forget. Even people that do the same kind of work as me is they think, oh, this game turns you into a monster. It's like, well, sit courtside at an NBA game and listen to what they're saying. Are they monsters or are they just very wealthy people playing a game and trying to get in each other's heads?
Right.
Right. And so the kinds of games that create these kind of interpersonal qualities in people tend to be the highly competitive ones, the ones that have leaderboards and status and rankings, the
Hmm.
games that focus on PvP, and the games that incentivize play that extends beyond the amount of time the person actually has to play. So, one of the things that even challenged me, and I had to step away from this game despite loving it, is Dead by Daylight. And when you buy that monthly pass and you start
Yep.
trying to progress from the level
Hmm.
one reward, which is a hat for somebody that you're never going to play as, and then the rank 80 reward is a new outfit for Lara Croft that you
Right.
really want, right? So, in order to get that outfit and feel like you didn't waste your money to buy into that premium track,
Yep.
you have to play enough to reach that 80 reward, which means if I only have 30 minutes to play, but I know I need to gain 8 ranks every day before the end of the month, then I'm not going to play for 30 minutes. I'm going to play for 2 hours. And that could create serious problems for me because I don't have 2 hours. And then if I'm a teenager or a college student that has less things on their plate, that 2 hours can become 11 or 12 in a
Right.
single day, right? And it's all because they want to get that extra reward. It's getting into their head as a
Hmm.
goal, and it's manipulating their sense of time to where they're acting against their own best interest because they have a biology test tomorrow they need to
Right.
study for. But at least they got that Laura outfit, right?
It's very important. But you know what? I feel seen based on this example because Dead by Daylight is my daily game.
I love that game. It's
I,
so good.
I love that game, but I will say, like, it was funny too because when you were talking about like people that rage during a game, I was going to bring that up. I go, that's my rage game too. I'll rage in that game
Do you play
sometimes.
Killer or Survivor the
Survivor,
majority? I'm
Survivor
always a
majority.
survivor too. I
Yes.
don't rage though. I cry and then I quit playing for weeks and then I'm like I'm not this kind of loser in any other
Yeah.
way in my life. I can do this. And
Yeah.
then Michael Myers just like
Kills you.
I hate him. I hate him
Yep.
so much. If I see any merch across Orlando,
Do this.
like my wife.
Yeah.
So my wife will say he's like right over there. I'll be like, what are they like? Why can't I get away from him?
Because he's
And
Michael Myers.
well, it's stupid. I
Yeah.
hate it. So
Yeah.
so even then there are things in video games that can make me have a rage response, even though I do try to stay pretty level-headed. But that's the fun of playing games, is it lets you access situations and emotions that aren't routine to your daily life, and then you
Mhm.
get to imagine how would I handle this? And sometimes that actually helps us to remain poised in stressful situations that actually occur because we're constantly stressed and paying attention to 7 or 8 points on the screen at a single time, just in
Mhm.
order to make these quick micro decisions of how we're going to handle the situation with our controller, a mouse, and keyboard.
Yeah, and I see how like how you can very easily translate all of this into like a treatment program or a therapy session.
Yeah.
Um, because like you said, we do these things every day. We get up in the morning and even the simple things of like I gotta brush my teeth, I have to make breakfast, I'm gonna go to the store and buy a coffee or whatever it is. It's like it's all those micro goals that will ultimately lead to whatever your big goal is that day, where it's like, if I do all these things, then I'm ready to go to work or whatever it is. Do you find that when people are dealing with behavioral addiction, that there are certain games that you think would be more helpful for that? Or to deal
Yeah.
with that type of thing because there are so many games out there and so many different genres out there, um and if people are using them for coping mechanisms, I would imagine, like, depending on, let's say, the issue they have, like you said, like people with behavioral addiction, it's like, what do you think, like, what kind of game do you think would be something to help with situations like that?
If you're in a situation where you're playing so much that you're causing consequences for yourself in life, like reporting to work late almost every day, getting written up and stuff, or failing some college or high school exams, or forgetting to pick up your kids from school on time. Just anything with time management, anything with forgetting your responsibility to yourself and how much other people are depending on you, right? That
Mhm.
those are the key issues that can occur when people lose that balanced place for where video games fit into their life. That doesn't mean video games are bad, and that doesn't mean the person is a bad person. It just means there's a game mechanic in their life that they haven't learned the proper strategy for, or they know the proper strategy and they're not using it. So, video game logic says you pull the boss again, you focus on getting that mechanic right. And when you line things up correctly, you're going to notice that this is a much smoother experience, that there's something happening in this room you're not understanding in real time.
Okay.
And so the quest in a boss encounter like that is to get in there, but be paying attention to your learning process so that you can understand. And then you might not clear it once you understand it, but then going into it additional times after you get that awareness, that's when the magical things can happen. So improving and overplaying habit or routine is not something that you can correct easily. Sometimes people just disconnect, give their console to their parents or best friend for a while, and just say, like, I'm not going to do this. But the problem with that is we can play so many things on our smart TV or on our
Mhm.
phones or on our laptops. And so, everything's an Xbox now, right? Uh,
You can't get away
so
from it. You
you
can't get
you
away from
can't
it.
you can't get away from it. And so that's typically why I don't even work with people on the idea of let's get the thing out of your life, because the goal is not reject this thing from your life permanently, because it's always going to be present again. The actual healing comes from this thing is present and available, but I know how to choose when to do it and when not to. And so, okay, back to the question of what games. Uh, any game that shifts your mindset into a more healing kind of mode can be a good idea. So if you're playing too much Marvel Rivals right now, um, or maybe the 90s version of that would be GoldenEye, right?
Go
Like
GoldenEye
if
is a good one. Yep. Hmm.
if you're
Or
playing
war.
too
I would
much
think World of Warcraft,
World of
right? When
Warcraft or EverQuest,
yeah.
right? Yeah, if you're playing too much of that, then switching to something that is just a quick puzzle to solve, um, like something like Wordle, something like even playing Tetris, something like Roller Coaster Tycoon that you mentioned earlier. Anything that has either a strategy and planning thing or even a cozy vibe to it, something that doesn't get you in the same mindset where time evaporates and it's 5 hours later, almost like nothing. And
Yeah.
so that is going to connect with the personality of the player and what motivates them to play. Also, if you're shifting to a different style of game than what gets you into that psychological flow of
Hmm.
just hyper focus, then you're also probably going to lose interest a little quicker and feel like you're done. And becoming more familiar with that feeling of being done is actually the intent.
Yeah. Yeah, like and in that sense, I almost like I feel like when I get in that kind of mode where I need that sense of completion, I will always go back to a game I've completed before. So, for example, one of my go-tos will always be the first Legend of Zelda.
Oh,
That is
nice.
I absolutely love that game. I have beaten it more times than any other game I own or have ever played. But again, it's one of those things. Not only do I love that game, but it's that it's that it's that just calming sense of I know when I start that game, I can finish it. And
Yeah,
so it just gives me it already gives me that sense of completion before I beat it because
yeah.
I know I'm going to get there.
I can't believe I didn't say this, but this makes you brilliant for what you just said. The games that cause these addictive processes,
Hmm.
typically you cannot beat them,
You can't beat them. Hmm.
right? So they're perpetually extending into the future for you.
Right.
that there is max level, but then there's end game, right? Or there's ranked, but then the season resets.
Right.
So you only get to enjoy that moment of being optimized for a small moment of time in your life.
Yeah.
And then in order to create retention in their player base, the game companies give you another thing that you have to chase after.
Yeah. Yeah, you beat this, and now the next day, up, we just restart from one. Everybody got to do
Mhm.
it all over again. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Again, it's one of the reasons why retro gaming to me is so important because for decades that wasn't necessarily the case. A game was created, it has a beginning and an ending, and the goal is to get to the end. And if it didn't have an end, I felt like those were more like, at least early on, you're like your Pac-Mans or things like that. It was all about score. Those to
Mhm.
me were the early like PvP games or your Dead by Daylights because you always wanted to go back and get a higher score.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, those games, those arcade cabinets would be at your pizzeria, they'd be at the
mhm.
gas station, they'd be at the arcades. And so if you get a higher score, people can see that and you get a
Yes.
local sense of pride. Like that's my machine because I've been first place on it for 8 weeks or something.
Exactly. So those were the early versions of our Dead by Daylights and Marvel Rivals and things like that. The arcade games. Um, but um, but yeah, but like I said, like getting into games like you already know that you can complete. Like to me, those are always like gratifying. Like I feel like they almost reset me in a way
Hmm.
when I need that, and I think that's really cool. Um, I wanted to switch gears a little bit to you also now aside from teaching, aside from being a counselor and all of that stuff, you are also known as Dr. Gameology.
Yeah, yeah,
So tell us a little
absolutely.
tell us about that.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I had this issue as an online grad school teacher where you have the course and then the students take the course, but their only interaction with me would be those messages when they're upset about how I graded them. So I
Hmm.
started to have burnout because the pandemic and no more going onto campus.
Of course.
And I also started to have this massive feeling that my students only think about me like I'm a grading bot, and they don't see me like I'm a person who actually does the things I'm teaching them how to do.
Hmm.
And I needed to change that because I have benefited so much in my career from opportunities that came out of the relationships between me and my professors, especially the professors that would teach me in the same classroom and also teach me 5 plus courses in the
Hmm.
whole curriculum for over a stretch of 3 to 5 years of my life, that this relationship is there. And that's not how online education works. Is it's very rare for me to have a student in two different classes that they get me one time and they will forget who I was and what course I even taught them. And I just despise that. I would wake up in the morning and that would fuel the burnout response.
Hmm.
And so I also at the time, I never told them that I stream on Twitch. I never told them that I do gaming research and present at international conferences for psychology about what video games are. I never talked to them about any of how my dissertation research on how MMO players play differently based on their personality type and things like that is I just compartmentalized everything.
Okay.
Like I'm teaching grad school, so I need to teach it like I'm a serious grad school professor. And I just realized that is why I'm burning out.
Hmm.
So I changed the name of my Twitch channel to something that I felt would help people understand what it is I am, even if they're not gamers, is just the idea of gameology. You hear that word and you have an idea of what it means. The study of games, just like
Hmm.
psychology is the study of the mind, study of the psyche. We add ology to something, it means the study of,
Right.
right? And so I changed my name to Dr. Gameology on Twitch, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, and everything. And I started to put out more content and also create content for my classes that I could share with my students. And I changed my faculty bio, I changed my website, and just started to, instead of being the Batman approach, which is nobody knows what Bruce Wayne is doing at nighttime, I
Mm-hmm.
went the Iron Man approach, where it's just like I'm at the podium and I'm Iron Man, right? I'm Dr.
Nice.
Gameology. And luckily, I had support from my university that yeah, it is absolutely okay for you to share things that you do that can help positively influence the community, influence the world, to harness your research and benefit from it. So I did that. I created my podcast, The Gaming Persona. I had a friend from a previous job. We've been friends now over 14 years or so, and but we were not working together at the time, and we were just talking during the pandemic across the country on the phone and having conversations. And I just said to her one day, these conversations could be a podcast. And I had previously done podcasting for um, one of the original podcast shows for Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Okay.
But that was a gamer podcast. There, like, I was a mental health professional, but I was not there to be a mental health professional. It was just I'm talking about the game that I did my dissertation research on. Um, and So I started to feel like not doing podcasting at all for about a year or so. I started to think, well, what would my show be? So we came up with
Okay.
the gaming persona, and then that really helped all the streams I was doing on Twitch to sort of have a place for me to reflect and talk about what's going on as well
Okay.
and come up with topics. So at the time I was streaming Persona 5 Royal and changed my name and then started doing this podcast. And then I connected with Dr. Anthony Bean at Geek Therapeutics, and he asked me to do a presentation on personality types in Star Wars: The Old Republic. And then that went very well. So then he asked me if I had other topics in mind. And then I did a presentation on Journey. And that game, I
I love
first
that game.
I know, I know.
I love that game.
That game, I first played it as a doc student when I was 1 month away from defending my dissertation. So if you want to talk about that transformative
Mm,
journey and making it to
yeah.
the top of a mountain, I'm going up that mountain during the apotheosis stage where all the music is the most like the
Yeah.
music at that part. I don't know how musically inclined everyone is, but the quarter note triplets, with the really high pitched, just very beautiful, echoing harmony with themes you've heard throughout the game, but slowed down and like instead of tense, it's like you're about to succeed at the most important thing your entire life. And so that game, I played it at a moment where I was living it, and it changed me like internally. I will never be the same because of that game.
Wow.
So I decided to actually put a presentation with the experience of the game. I literally had footage of the entire game embedded into the PowerPoint, but
Okay.
I was able to talk over it and do the TED Talk style stuff while the game is being played. And then I would have PowerPoint slides too. So I went through the game and broke down every stage of the hero's journey, and then I would break up the gameplay. And I've never
Okay.
seen anyone else do a presentation like this in an academic forum. And it hit really big with that community. I still get emails every couple months from people who go and do the on demand version of that training. And some of the most powerfully supportive things any people have ever said to me still come at me from that presentation. And
Oh
so
wow.
that led to me I've been talking a long time. Is this story too long? Because I can
No,
break it up.
no, no. I'm loving the story. I'm completely engaged in it, and not only
Okay.
that, but I need to see this presentation
Yeah,
because, like, I played through Journey, and Journey was one of those games too where I felt like this is such a there's such a deep emotional connection that you make with that game
right.
a-
But
as you're
you
going through
can't
it.
you can't have that reaction unless you play the game, right?
Yes.
And that's the challenge. When I tell people about Journey, they look at me so funny.
Hmm.
And it's like you don't understand. So then I was that's why I included the full game footage
Right.
as PowerPoint slides, in addition to the 30 or so academic slides where I talk about human suffering and I talk about transcending struggles and I talk about what the monomyth even is. I talk about Joseph Campbell and Hero with a Thousand Faces. And um, so there's my segue to finish really what this all is about. When I was in undergrad, so before I was a counselor, just college, regular college, right after high school, I read Hero with a Thousand Faces for the first time because the Star Wars DVDs came out and
Okay.
they had that documentary Empire of Dreams, and it opens with George Lucas's fascination with Joseph Campbell and the Hero with a Thousand Faces and what the hero's journey is. And the hero's journey, in a quick way to explain it, is the idea that every story that our heroes in fiction go through is roughly the same story with the same ups and downs and the same narrative structure. And we just change the details. So,
Hmm.
Frodo in the Shire is Luke in Tatooine, is Harry Potter in the cupboard under the stairs, is Link waking up and Navi saying, "Hey, listen."
Yep.
And so I always felt since I was about 18 years old, somebody needs to write Hero with a Thousand Faces, but just with video games, right? Like that's a no-brainer. It's so easy.
Yep.
Ocarina of Time was the first game for me that really felt like that. And so remembering that I had played that about 8 years earlier ish,
Okay.
and then all of these thoughts in my 18-year-old mind with this Joseph Campbell book in my hand, I was like, when someone writes that, I'll buy it day one. I will enjoy reading it. That will be amazing. And
And
then,
it sounds amazing, but it sounds similar to, and I don't know if I'm going to jump the gun with this one, but it sounds similar to the actual book that you wrote because I know
yeah,
you wrote a book, you wrote The Gamer's Journey, which
yeah,
is which sounds literally like that.
yeah, that is exactly what my book is. And so fast
So
forward
yeah,
so many years after that idea in my 18-year-old self, nobody had written the book yet. And I would look like, has anyone written this?
right.
So 2010, nobody wrote it. 2015, nobody wrote it. 2020, nobody wrote it. And then I was able to write a chapter for Psychology of Pokemon, and it was received very easily.
Okay.
They loved it. The publisher loved it. And they said, you should keep writing. So then the pandemic gave me, a lot of time just to focus on work, knock it out quickly, and then figure out, can I do more research? So I did another research study on Final Fantasy 14 and psychological
Hmm.
flow. And then I started a research task force that's doing stuff for the American Psychiatric Association to look at video games a little bit deeper. And so, like, I started doing all these really cool things in the field of psychology, and then people are saying your writing's really good. And this is book writing, not scientific
Right.
paper writing. And so I knew what I could do in scientific writing. I didn't realize that I'm possibly better at book writing. So then the thought started to twist around, and writing one chapter is not the same as writing 19. But I started to realize it's that journey stuff,
Hmm.
in the game journey. the very first thing that happens when you stand up, before you even hit the crest of that first hill and see the mountain,
Hmm.
you walk across the sand dunes and there's all these gravestones
Yep.
of people that didn't even get to start their journey. And that is what happens in life. It's people that did life the way other people wanted them to and didn't listen to that voice inside that was telling them what their purpose is. And my purpose really started to wake up and torture me because what I started to realize is nobody wrote the book yet, and you're going to have to. And that's a really powerful thought if you have the energy to handle it. It's terrifying if you don't believe in yourself. But eventually I got over all those feelings and created an outline. And then I was looking at the outline and I thought, well, what would the first page look like of chapter one? So then I wrote five instead of one. And then I was like, I've had these ideas living inside me for 20 years now. And all I have to do is prepare the ideas in a logical structure and then put them on paper. It didn't ever feel writing the book like it was a struggle that I couldn't overcome. It was all more, what can I accomplish in the time that I have today?
Well, and
And
you had it
yeah,
written. You kind of already had it written in your head, so to speak. It just needed
right.
to come out.
Yeah. So I have a copy of it right here. The Gamer's Journey by Leyline Publishing, written by me. Um, and so that's what this book is. If you look at the cover, just the front cover, there's at least 15 different video game references. The journey traveler, the robe has
Yep.
the Jungian archetypes instead of the symbols. Just
Nice.
transform it into that psychology message and not taking verbatim from what that game company was able to put together. But so the idea is I'm going to tell the story of the hero's journey from the perspective of psychology in video games, like a psychology professional that enjoys video games, but I'm
Hmm.
going to share the history of psychology, just like Campbell shared anthropology, philosophy, the beginning of psychology, because that book was published in 1949. So you have Carl Jung, you have Sigmund Freud, and you don't have a lot beyond that because it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
And for us now, I teach counseling theories and I use video games to teach those theories. So when we're doing behaviorism, I'm using some footage of Demon Souls and me losing and then trying
Mm.
to figure out how to succeed. For cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm using Mario Kart and some footage of a person having a very seriously unlucky end to a match where they get hit by seven different items and go from first place to 12th place and talking about the
Been
cognitive
there.
messages. Yeah, we all have.
We've
It's
all been there.
programmed.
We've all
It's
been there.
programmed to happen. It's inevitable. Yeah, so just using moments like that to teach the lessons of how these theories work. And that's
Hmm.
in the gamer's journey as well. So, but it's
Cool.
written in a way that I wanted teenagers to be able to digest it. I wanted parents to be able to digest it, even if they're not gamers. I
Hmm.
wanted grad students to be able to understand it, even if they've never played the games that I'm using. Also, I tried to write it in a way that you can think of a different game for this chapter. And I
Okay.
love that. And I hope that you message me and let me know, hey, I loved your chapter seven, but I thought of this game instead. And it's like, yeah, because that's your journey. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
That's
You
that's
know,
that's really cool. It's really cool that you made it. You kind of made it a very approachable book from all different ages, and I think that's really cool. And to be honest with you, like just hearing about it and the idea behind it, I'm chomping at the bit to kind of get a copy of that and read it myself. So I'll be purchasing that wherever it's
yeah.
available.
And also, one of the coolest things that's happened since November is when people reach out to me and tell me where they are in the book.
Hmm.
And actually, one of my longest running supporters since I started streaming on Twitch got the book from his family as a Christmas gift. So that blew me away. Like
That's
I
cool.
never a single moment in anything I've ever done thought that what I'm creating is somebody's Christmas gift. Um, but
It's a
they
good feeling.
just yeah, they just told me this week that they finished it, and that's the first person ever to, double back, connect with me and
Mm,
say I finished the book. Um, so that's wild to me is
yeah.
but there's roughly 200 different games that are mentioned and used to create the structure of the hero's journey. And that
Okay.
was some of the most fun things too, because there were moments where I knew that a game that I haven't played is the perfect example of this stage. So then you have to start watching Let's Plays or some of them I got for myself on Steam and
I
did
was
it
just gonna say you
myself.
just get them and you play them. Yeah, and that's how
Yeah,
you do it.
the problem is if you need a specific cutscene that happens 35 hours into a 40-hour game,
That's fair.
then maybe the Let's Play route is better.
Yes.
But yeah, so a lot of the games come directly from my game experience, but I also did my very best to recognize what games are the critical example of this idea in the history of video games.
Okay.
And so, almost made it to 200 games in the game list, and which I'm still very proud of that because most video game related like geek therapy or academic writing focuses
Mhm.
on one
They
or
focus
like
on one game.
one
Yeah.
franchise. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's probably going to be one of the more interesting things about reading the book is the fact that you're not just connecting it to one, you're connecting it you're because you're connecting it to so many games, the people reading the book, anybody reading the book, they're most likely to make a connection with what you're saying because the odds are one of those games they've played. And
Yeah.
then the other ones that maybe they haven't now they'll be interested in trying because of what you wrote there. So I think it's really cool that you did go that route. Um and again, the name of the book is The Gamer's Journey, right? And
Yes. Hmm.
is it available like on Amazon, just the usual
Amazon,
places,
Barnes and Noble, My
right?
Shop,
All
the
right,
Geek
cool.
Therapeutic Shop, everywhere that you can buy books, it's available.
All right, so yeah, so like anybody out there who watches or listens, this sounds like a book to definitely pick up. I would, like I said, I would love to give it a read. I'll definitely hit you up while I'm reading it now because
Yeah,
now that
do
people
it.
do that, I definitely want to do that. But I would also love to maybe get you back on at a later date to
Yeah, when you
talk
finished it,
to
that
talk
that
about
would
the
be
book after I
amazing.
finish it, and then we'll be like, hey, wait a minute, now I got to talk about this. Um,
Yeah.
so that would be really cool. Um, and then just before we wrap this up, I wanted to hit you on a couple of things, just a couple of quick hits I wanted to
Yeah, let's
try
do
out
it.
here. So, because you've been talking about, what you do and everything like that, but now I want to just talk about really quickly what you gain. So, few quick hits. Of all of the consoles that have ever been created, which console can you not live without? You can only pick one.
Oh my goodness. PS5?
Has to be PS. Okay, so current.
Yeah,
Nothing. Okay. All right. Who is or no, not who is, what it, favorite video game of all time? And again, you can only pick one.
Final
Not
Fantasy
franchise,
7.
just a game. Final
Yeah.
Fantasy VII. Okay. You know what? I can't argue that. Uh, favorite video game franchise?
Uh Final
Same
Fantasy.
same
But
answer.
I want to give a couple runner ups so that people don't think that I'm like a
Just the
one
Final
note
Fantasy.
person, right?
Go for it.
Resident Evil, BioShock, Devil May Cry are all like I wish I could say that, but
They're
it's
all
still
up
Final
there.
Fantasy. And then there's Pokemon, there's Elden Ring. Any game that I've written a chapter in a psychology of book is
Hmm.
in there for me because it has that special place where I was able to
Yeah.
merge my love of playing it with giving people some really creative ideas about why this matters.
Okay.
Um, like one of the weird things that happened when you start getting verified on all these apps because you start
Yeah.
having things happen in your career is oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. I'm gonna hate myself. The voice actor for Chris Redfield in the
Oh,
Resident Evil remake for GameCube,
uh,
right?
Yeah.
reached out to me and said that he saw something I said and my podcast sounds great, and
Nice.
wanted to make sure I knew what he was up to, and just Resident Evil is like one of the my favorite franchises. I just played Silent Hill 2 a couple months ago.
Oh,
I
nice.
loved it. I never played the original.
Okay.
And I know that if I would have been exposed to Silent Hill during high school or college, I'd be right up there with that too. But Resident Evil, I mean, you
Okay.
see Ada Wong right above my
No, no,
head.
I see
Yeah,
her,
yeah.
and I know you wrote an article about her too. I saw it on your website, but
Yeah, it's so my okay. The
but not to
internet
go.
internet is the internet, okay?
Yes.
And unfortunately, there are so many videos I've done that have had some good moments, right? Like when I
Hmm.
did my Sora and the Power of Friendship videos, someone who worked on Dream Drop Distance messaged me on LinkedIn and said, "We actually had internal conversations about the things that you talked about with Sora and Donald and Goofy in your video."
Nice.
So really, really nice work, right? But as far as getting views and having the channel grow, having a archetype analysis of Ada Wong and Tifa Lockhart
Yep.
has done a lot more for me because I suspect they have some things about them that Sora doesn't have.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you on that.
Yeah, so
Um,
uh,
all right,
that's
hold
just
on.
how the internet works.
Yep. And then getting back to, I got two more questions for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. And again, this is just about, these are just fun favorite types thing. If you're trapped on a desert island, what video game character do you want with you?
That's so hard. Can we just get someone from Minecraft that can just like
Nope.
build me a really nice mansion?
No, the
No.
idea is like who's with you there?
Um, well, if I have no hope of getting off the island, we'll go
Yeah.
with Tifa Lockhart.
Okay, done. That's all you need to say.
Yeah.
And then, all right. Last question I'm going to hit you with. Who, in your opinion, is the most misunderstood video game villain?
All right. I have two choices, and they're both from Resident Evil, and it really comes down to if you agree one of them is a villain. So
Okay.
it could be Ada Wong because I don't believe she's a villain,
I don't think
but she
so.
doesn't go out of her way to make that clear to the people who are clearly heroes like Leon.
Okay.
So if she's not a villain and that's a bad answer, then we're gonna go with Albert Wesker because
Okay.
he's clearly super evil, and I'm not trying to say he's actually good, but I think that anybody who's that talented at science originally had good intentions and then just got screwed up by their power hungry humanity kinds of shortcomings. So I think that if he just would have had better friends and a better ethics professor, then everything could have turned out a lot better.
Well, I wish he had better programmers in Dead by Daylight because he's one of my least favorite characters to play against.
Ah, but I love that. Ah, he's the killer that I play as. I'm not even joking. Okay.
Well, see, you know what? We're just at odds then. Sorry. Daniel, it's been absolutely fun and fascinating talking with you. Like I said, I would love to have you back on again once I read your book so we can talk about that a little bit. But until then, where can people find you?
All right. Well, my favorite places for people to find me would be at Twitch. I'm Dr. Gameology on Twitch. Or if you want to watch my YouTube videos, also Dr. Gameology over there. And if you want to hear some of my ideas on my show, you can check out the Gaming Persona podcast or read The Gamer's Journey.
All right. Sounds good. Daniel, one more time, thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Kaufman, for being on the Retro Gamers podcast. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Continue the journey, everyone.
The Retro Gamers podcast is brought to you by Old School Gamer magazine. Sign up for as little as $20 per year for 6 issues that include feature articles, interviews with retro programmers, new and old product reviews, and more. If you look carefully, you'll even see an article or two penned by yours truly. You can head over to oldschoolgamermagazine.com/retrogamerspodcast and sign up so they know where you heard about it. Old School Gamer is dedicated to you, the old school retro gamers from the arcades to your home. All right, welcome back. We're going to wrap up this show. And once again, special thank you to Daniel Kaufman for joining us on the show. I thought that was an excellent interview. And again, it's always great to talk gaming, especially with somebody who is basically a professional and uses it to help people, which I think is really, really awesome. In terms of just gaming in general, like in gaming this week, with the Retro Gamers podcast, we've been doing a couple of changes online on the show. If you noticed on either our Facebook page or our YouTube page, there are some we put up some daily retro birthdays now. You'll see some retro cheats. So we're trying some different things. There are also going to be more game playthroughs posted online. So if you're ever interested in just checking out a playthrough, there are a couple of new ones that we threw up there recently. The Seventh Guest for PC, Super Castlevania 4, and you can look for those. I'm gonna be posting those maybe once every 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more frequently as I get through games. But I've just really been bitten by the bug with the show and the changes that have come with the show. So I'm definitely been playing a lot more, but I've also been capturing it so that I can share that with the rest of you guys. So yeah, so just remember to always like and subscribe and share if you want to hear more from the Retro Gamers Podcast. And you can find us at facebook.com/Retro Gamers Podcast, on Instagram and Blue Sky at Retro Gamers Podcast. You can watch us on YouTube and on Spotify. You can listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also email me at email@theretrogamers.com. If you have a comment, a suggestion, if there's a specific game you want me to play, definitely open to that and would love to share it. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.